September 12th, 1958. Harlem, 11:47 p.m. Big Sam's palm was damp inside his jacket, fingers locked around cold metal like it could steady his heartbeat. Witnesses later said you could see it in his shoulders, too stiff, too high, like his body was trying to crawl out of its own skin. $50,000. That's what the 5 families had reportedly attached to one name, Bumpy Johnson. And the man hired to collect it wasn't some outsider with a cheap grin. It was Sam, Bumpy's security for 5 years, the one Bumpy called brother, the one who stood closest when the room got dangerous. The assignment was clean on paper. Walk into the Lenox Lounge, wait for the right angle, 1 shot to the back of the head, then vanish, quiet as cigarette smoke. Sam pushed through the entrance and the warm air hit him. Jazz on the bandstand, ice clinking in glasses, perfume and sweat braided together.
A server slid past with a tray, and Sam caught a glimpse of his own reflection in the mirror behind the bar, eyes wide, jaw clenched, not looking like a man about to become rich, looking like a man about to become ruined. Bumpy was there, exactly where he always was. Corner table, calm posture, gray suit sitting perfect, fedora parked beside his drink like it owned the room. Sam stopped near the bar, pretending to watch the band, pretending to listen to laughter, but his gaze kept snapping back to Bumpy's chair. And that's when the room started to tilt. Because this wasn't just a hit. This was a test of gravity, of what pulls harder, loyalty or desperation. But here's what nobody in that lounge knew yet. Bumpy Johnson wasn't surprised by any of it.
To understand why this moment became Harlem legend, you've got to understand what Bumpy represented in 1958. He wasn't only a rackets boss in a nice suit. Sources claim Harlem saw him as a kind of shield, someone who made the neighborhood harder to exploit. In a time when money, power, and violence all pressed inward, Bumpy stood in the doorway like a locked chain. And the Italians wanted past him. By the late 50s, the numbers racket wasn't pocket change. It was nickels and dimes stacked into mountains, millions flowing through hands that didn't own banks and couldn't get loans. The 5 families had tried to take bigger bites for years, but every road into Harlem kept ending at the same name. They tried pressure, enforcers and threats. They tried deals, smoke-filled rooms and soft promises. They tried political leverage, friends in offices, and men on payroll.
And each time, Harlem stayed Harlem. That's when desperation started making decisions. Reportedly, a meeting happened. Big names, big suits. Frank Costello at the head of the table. Carlo Gambino listening, cigar lit, eyes half-lidded like he already knew the answer. Force wasn't working. Money wasn't working. So Costello's idea, sources claim, was colder than violence. Make him touchable. Not by going through Bumpy, by going through the person closest to him. And someone said 2 words that changed everything. Big Sam. Sam Foster, 6'4", built like a doorframe, loyal like a locked jaw. He'd been beside Bumpy since '53. People around Harlem whispered he'd taken bullets meant for Bumpy. He'd been present for funerals, raids, street wars, and late-night meetings where the air tasted like risk.
If anybody could get close enough for a point-blank shot, it was him. So the family sent a man who didn't need to threaten you. He just needed to understand you. Tony the Collector, witnesses later called him. A salesman type, the kind who smiles like he's offering you a better future while quietly pricing out your soul. August 20th, 1958, 3 weeks before the night at Lenox. Sam steps out near 132nd Street and a black Cadillac rolls up like a shadow with headlights. The window lowers. Tony sits inside, relaxed, like the street belongs to him. Big Sam, Tony says, friendly, familiar, too sure. Sam's hand shifts toward where he keeps his .45. Not fast, not dramatic, just instinct.
Tony gestures to the seat. 5 minutes. If you don't like what you hear, you walk. Sam should have kept walking. But curiosity is a quiet trap, and desperation is the spring-loaded part. Sam gets in.
Tony doesn't talk about pride. He talks about pain. He talks about Sam's youngest, Kesha, sick for months, treatments costing more than a bodyguard's paycheck, bills stacking higher than hope. And Tony says it like he's reading from Sam's own kitchen table. Then the briefcase opens. Neat stacks of hundreds, perfect edges. The kind of money that looks unreal because it's never been near your life before. $50,000. Enough, Tony says, to cover every hospital note. Enough to move the family somewhere clean, somewhere that doesn't feel like the walls are closing in. Enough to rewrite the ending. Sam's throat tightens. Because in that moment, the money doesn't look like greed. It looks like oxygen. For what? Sam asks anyway, like asking could make the answer softer. One moment, Tony says. One pull. September 12th, Lenox Lounge. Bumpy at his regular table. Wait for distraction.
Shoot 'em in the back of the head. A car will be waiting. New names. New place. Miami by morning. Sam stares at the cash, and the silence between his breaths grows heavy. And if I don't? Sam asks. Tony's smile drains away, and his voice turns flat. Then your daughter keeps fading in a charity ward, and you keep standing beside Bumpy until somebody decides to put a price on you too. That's when Sam realizes this isn't an offer. It's a doorway with a fire behind it. Sam steps out without committing, but the briefcase stays with him. And that night, the ceiling doesn't feel high enough. Sam lies awake listening to the city. Sirens far away, a neighbor's radio, the soft rattle of pipes, while his mind keeps returning to the same two images, Kesha's breathing, and those stacks of cash. 3 days later, Sam calls the number. Half now, Sam says. Half after. Done, Tony replies.
And with that, the contract becomes real. But what happened next is what made this story echo for decades. Because Sam thought he was hiding it from Bumpy. He wasn't. Bumpy Johnson, by most accounts, didn't survive Harlem by trusting the right people. He survived by knowing people. The kind of knowing that comes from paying attention to what others ignore. According to sources, Bumpy had eyes everywhere. Bartenders, cab drivers, elevator operators, shoeshine boys. People the Italians didn't consider valuable enough to notice. One of them, reportedly a parking attendant named Jerome, saw that Cadillac outside Sam's building, saw Sam get in, saw the plate, wrote it down like it mattered, because in Harlem, information could be worth more than a gun. Jerome brings it to Bumpy.
Bumpy looks at the plate number, then looks through Jerome like he's staring into a future he doesn't like. He pays Jerome and tells him he saw nothing, and then Bumpy sits alone for a long time, because he could have solved it the usual way. A quick phone call, a body disappears, problem gone. That's what most kings do, cut out the rot. But Bumpy, reportedly, chose something different. He didn't just want Sam stopped, he wanted the Italians taught. So he called a gunsmith in Brooklyn, Victor, a man who'd been adjusting weapons for years. And Bumpy's request was strange. Make me a gun that looks perfect, but can't fire. Not obviously broken, not a toy. A flawless lie. A weapon that, when the moment comes, delivers nothing but a sound. Victor modifies a .38 to be dead on arrival. Same weight, same feel, same look, but no true bite behind it. Now all Bumpy needs is the swap.
4 days before Lenox, Bumpy sends Sam across town on a time-consuming errand. And while Sam's gone, Bumpy and a trusted associate reportedly enter Sam's apartment. They find the gun where Sam always keeps it. They switch it. Sam comes home, slips the gun into his jacket like always, never knowing he's carrying a prop.
and Bumpy waits. Because the lesson only works if Sam pulls the trigger. That's the cruel genius of it. Bumpy didn't want a rumor. He wanted witnesses. Back to September 12th. Lenox Lounge is packed. Around 300 people, sources claim. Hustlers, musicians, neighborhood figures, a couple politicians who pretend they're only there for the jazz. Smoke hangs in layers under the lights. The band is mid-song, horns warm and loud, drums pushing like a heartbeat you can dance to.
Bumpy sits at his corner table, talking business like it's an ordinary Friday. An untouched drink, a calm face, no glances over the shoulder. Sam arrives around 11:30, not stumbling, but not sober either, just enough liquor to blur the edges of fear. He takes a position near the bar, eyes scanning, body coiled. The room doesn't suspect a thing, because Sam being near Bumpy is normal. That's his job. 11:47. Sam starts walking. He moves through the crowd with that bodyguard glide, shoulders forward, head steady, one hand inside his jacket, fingers around the grip. 6 feet. 4. 2. Behind Bumpy's chair, close enough to smell the fabric of his suit. A bartender notices first, eyes widening, mouth parting. Someone at a nearby table freezes mid-laugh, like their face forgot how to be human. Sam brings the gun up, aims at the back of Bumpy Johnson's head, and pulls. Click. Not a gunshot.
Not a scream, just that thin, empty sound. A sound like a door trying to latch, but finding no frame. The band stops as if someone cut the power. A glass slips from somebody's hand and cracks on the floor. For a beat, the entire lounge is nothing but silence and breathing. Then Bumpy, slow, unhurried, takes a small sip of his drink. He sets it down carefully, like he's placing a chess piece, and turns around. Bumpy's eyes lock onto Sam's. Not rage, not panic. Something worse. Disappointment, heavy and quiet, like a coat you can't take off. And Bumpy says, evenly, 5 words witnesses would repeat for 50 years. I've been counting on you. That's when Sam's face collapses, because in that instant he understands. The Italians didn't outsmart Bumpy. They walked into a room Bumpy had already arranged. Sam's fingers loosen. The useless gun drops and clatters across the floor.
His knees give out like strings were cut. He sinks down, shaking. "I'm sorry," he stammers, words spilling like blood you can't stop. Bumpy cuts through it. "I know about your daughter." The room tightens. Because now it isn't just a hit. It's a public unmasking. Bumpy reaches into his jacket and places an envelope on the table. Thick, clean, sealed like a verdict. "Bills paid," Bumpy says. Quiet, but loud enough to reach every corner. "As of this morning. And there's more in there for your family." Sam looks up, tears gathering fast. Anger, shame, relief, all colliding. Why didn't you tell me?" Sam whispers. Bumpy leans in just slightly. "Because I needed to see what you'd pick." A pause. A silence beat so sharp it feels like it could cut. "Now I know." Bumpy stands, 5'10" or so. Not towering. But in that moment, the room treats him like something bigger than height. He doesn't order Sam killed. That's what everyone expects. Instead, Bumpy gives Sam a sentence. You leave Harlem tonight. You take your family and you disappear. If I ever see you again, there won't be another mercy. Sam nods, broken. Then Bumpy adds the part meant for the Italians. And when they ask what happened, you tell them the truth. You tell them I already knew. Sam gathers himself, picks up the dead gun like it weighs 1,000 pounds, and walks out. Witnesses said no one stopped him, not because they forgave him,
but because what just happened felt bigger than revenge. The door closes behind Sam, and that's when the room changed again. Bumpy turns to the crowd, 300 people staring, trying to understand what they just watched. An assassination attempt turned into a demonstration.
They think they can purchase us, he says, voice steady. They think they can split us apart, buy one of us, and then buy all of us. He lets that sit. Their mistake is thinking Harlem has a price. Bumpy lifts his glass. Harlem isn't for sale. The words land like a stamp on paper, and the room answers him, glasses raised, low murmurs turning into agreement, the community knitting itself back together in real time. The band starts up again, carefully at first, then full. The night continues, because Harlem had learned to keep moving, even when death tried to interrupt. But nothing was the same, because by morning, the story was everywhere. A hit was set, a brother was flipped, the trigger was pulled, and the only thing that fired was a lesson. Sources claim the 5 families held emergency conversations almost immediately.
Costello furious, Gambino quiet, too quiet, the way a man gets when he finally accepts the board isn't his. And Gambino reportedly said what no one expected: "We leave Harlem alone." Not because they got soft, because they realized the truth. And when he died in 1968, it wasn't by gunfire. Reports say it was a heart attack in the same Lenox Lounge. But the legend of that clique stayed, because the most dangerous weapon in Harlem wasn't the pistol. It was foresight, quiet, patient, sharp. The Italians bought Sam's betrayal for $50,000 and still walked away poor. Sam left with money and a lifetime of weight in his chest. And Bumpy Johnson? He stayed seated, king-like, finishing his drink, as if history hadn't just tried and failed to erase him.
Because some men don't survive by being bulletproof. They survive by being ready.